Welcome back to Archaeology After Dark, everyone. It is a beautiful morning, and I'm glad you could join us. My guest today is Luke Pecoraro. Luke, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's all good.
So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, currently I am the director of archaeology and museum collections at the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust, based just 12 miles north of Charleston, South Carolina. I have been a field archaeologist for about 25 years now. Mostly did a lot of my, initial training in the Mid-Atlantic, doing a lot of CRM. Did 5 years as a staff archaeologist at Jamestown Rediscovery, working on that 17th century English settlement in Virginia. And then I ended up going to graduate school at Boston University. So I did a little bit of field work in New England. Um, and then in a roundabout weird way, as we all find ourselves in archaeology, I did a little bit of work down in the Caribbean, on several islands, including Barbados, Montserrat, St. John, St. Thomas, Nevis, and St. Kitts. And then I did my doctoral dissertation fieldwork in County Cork in Ireland. And following that, did a stint as a staff archaeologist and then later director of archaeology at Mount Vernon, and then wound up down here in South Carolina. So I've a little bit of everything.
I mean, that's the joys of archaeology is you literally can do it anywhere with permission, of course, but you can do
No,
it.
yeah, no, and that's it. And that's the fun thing. I mean, we all, I like to say, speak the same language when it comes to doing field work, and things might differ slightly from place to place. But as long as you make friends and keep up those contacts, it's such a fun position to be in.
Yeah. So, tell us about Drayton Hall.
Sure. Well, Drayton Hall, the name is derived from the family who ends up building the structure that still occupies the property, is circa 1738 Palladian architectural execution by John Drayton. But it's got a little bit of earlier history, so I just want to go into that very briefly. There's a 14th century Native American settlement that's on the property that the main build sits on top of. And for those of you who know the Low Country of South Carolina, it's called low for a reason. And Drayton Hall is a whopping 17.62 feet above sea level. So great place for settlement for everybody, right? We've not flooded. It's been through multiple earthquakes, hurricanes, basically anything natural that can be thrown at you. And then the man-made disasters that have come forthwith, uh, have not ravaged the house. So it's a really remarkable plantation landscape. So you've got a 14th century Native American settlement. South Carolina is officially patented and settled by English planters in 1670. The earliest occupation that we have for English settlement is 1674, and the property goes through a succession of owners up until the time when John Drayton buys it out around 1738. And the plantation grows out from around 400 acres to just a little bit over 500 by the time John Drayton meets his demise in 1779. But it's a unique survivor in this particular region of South Carolina, where a lot of the other earlier plantation builds are completely destroyed during the Revolutionary War and then later American Civil War. So, it's a really remarkable plantation landscape. We are preserved by the National Trust for Historic Preservation beginning in 1974, and they had the forethought to acquire the complete plantation acreage, which again is rather unique when you're studying the plantation as a unit for inquiry, to be able to look at the whole thing. And moving forward, there was a campaign of archaeological fieldwork that was done between 1974 and 1976 that really focused on the historic core of the plantation, but then limited fieldwork aside from a number of different field schools from 1978 up until about 2021, when Drayton Hall decided that it was time to form a permanent department of archaeology so we could have staff archaeologists in place. So I know that that's a bit rambly, but I hope that that gives you a brief summary of what we are, what we're doing, and kind of what resources we're working with out here.
So you mentioned doing field schools on site. Does Drayton Hall host the field schools themselves, or does a university do that?
Currently, we do not. The field schools that have been held in the past were done through the College of Charleston and the Charleston Museum. As I mentioned, 2021, the department here kind of got reconstituted and rethought of as being a more permanent fixture. It's been dribs and drabs, through the National Trust system leading up to that point. But in years to come, we do hope to be able to hold a field school. Of course, the global pandemic and lockdown um, really diminished the opportunities that students could have. And I think that we're in a really interesting period of time where people are beginning to rethink what a field school looks like and how that's going to take place. So, in years to come, I think we will be offering one. Fingers
Yeah,
crossed.
yeah, that's something that I, consistently do in this program. Thought of, I started it during the pandemic so people could talk about their research when they didn't necessarily have a platform or a forum to do so. That people have taken like a harder look at the value of archaeology since the world has started turning again.
Absolutely, yeah, and again, when things kind of shut down and the public wasn't able to take house tours at Drayton Hall, one of the things that we were able to do to kind of pivot as a unit was to offer more outdoor reconnaissance, for lack of a better term. We have 110 acres that the National Trust for Historic Preservation controls outright, and we are a co-stewardship site, which is an interesting dynamic to kind of bring into the mix. In that, while the National Trust owns the property, the Drayton Hall Preservation Trust is able to use all the gate admissions and all of these other external funds to pump into programs like archaeology, because archaeology does not occur on all of the National Trust for Historic Preservation sites. I think between Drayton Hall and Montpelier, which is in central Virginia, the home of James Madison, we're unique in that operating structure. But you know, being able to continue to bring the public in and get them outside, social distancing, to work on the wooded tracks of the property that we've got, to look for the dwellings of the formerly enslaved occupants. There's a great postbellum community that was quite robust that existed on this landscape, after the Civil War, and the remains of their house lots are not completely understood. So we were able to engage with our volunteers and keep our donors excited, even during that period. So I think that I don't want to say that, if this ever happens again, we have a model that we can
Crossed
work
on
on.
that.
Yeah, fingers crossed, right? But archaeology can be a sustainable resource for people that want to get outside and keep engaging with the historic site.
Yeah, I know, especially, in the case of an archaeologist during the pandemic, I started just digging holes just to stave the cabin fever off. Did I find anything? No, but it kept me from, going over the edge of the cliff.
Yeah, yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's like the mental stimulation and kind of the thrill of the hunt. And if you have research questions that you can answer, just by doing something as simple as that, shovel testing or pedestrian survey, uh, you know, people eat it up and they're interested in the process. And that has paid dividends moving ahead now that we're able to welcome visitors back and kind of get back out into the field. And it's given us a lot of more room for inquiry, so to speak. I mean, it's a big plantation. There are 6 buildings that we know of, including only one that is still standing, but there were 30 in the plantation inventory of the Drayton family. So we have a lot of work to do, and a small team of 2 full-time archaeologists and a lot of dedicated volunteers.
Yeah, that's the thing about doing archaeology at like an active historic site is when people come and visit it, you give the narrative to them, but the finding of the actual artifacts on site makes it real. Like it's not just, a story that we tell people anymore.
Indeed, and that's the great thing that we kind of have going for us on this site. And elsewhere where I've done public archaeology, as I mentioned, I worked at Jamestown, which is very public facing. Mount Vernon was the same way. But we've been working on the historic core of the plantation. We have a strategic plan to be able to, you know, accomplish three goals within the next 10 years. And those goals include finding out where the enslaved population lived on the Drayton Hall plantation landscape, which, is easier said than done because you have multiple periods of plantation. So, what exactly are we looking for? And what we like to say we focus on is the Drayton family's period of occupation, and that was heaviest between 1738 and about 1844. The rest of the time, it's just kind of a showpiece, and the family is living in town. The second goal that we have laid out for archaeology is to look at the design landscape of Drayton Hall. And for anybody who's listening to this that knows about doing garden archaeology, it's not exactly the most thrilling endeavor. But when you're looking at kind of a cool designed landscape, we need to be strategic about it to get people fired up about finding gravel paths and not necessarily the flashy showpiece artifacts that people associate with the work that we do. And then the third big goal that we have is leading up to the semi-sesquicentennial in 2026, thinking about the role that Drayton Hall as a plantation had to play during the American Revolution. Um, and I think that in the brief period of time that we've reconstituted the program beginning in 2021, we've been able to really engage with our visitors by opening up areas around the main plantation house that ticks all three of those boxes, which is a bit of a challenge. But with the field work that had taken place in the 1970s, there were a lot of things that were only partially done around the main house. So right now, the work that we're undertaking is on one of the dependency buildings, the north flanker, which was only about a quarter of the way. Actually, I would say I would go even further, only halfway excavated between 1981 and 1982. And this would have been a residence for the enslaved population, a place where a lot of the work was being done, part of the designed landscape because of where it fits. And then also, it's one of the only areas on the plantation where we can definitively say that we have artifacts that relate to the American Revolution. And this excavation takes place right where the public tours go into the main house. So anybody who comes to visit Drayton Hall between now and perhaps July, because it's going to get too hot for us to be outside anymore. Um, yeah, we'll be able to see an active open area excavation on a building that has dimensions of approximately 17 by 33 feet and would have been 2 stories tall. So it's really a fun thing to be part of that tour and part of the broader narrative about what's going on and how do we know what we know and what are we working on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I've been saying is that, when you do like an active investigation on a site, people can actually see the process of it. Like I think people get the impression that when you conduct an archaeological survey, you're doing it like out of sight. People can actually see what you're doing. They don't necessarily have a lot of reason to be reassured in what you're doing because they can't actually see it. But when you're doing it in front of people where they can actually see what you're doing and see how delicate the process is, I think it's much more impactful that way.
No, and you're exactly correct. I mean, we don't get millions of visitors per year to Drayton Hall, and the people that are primarily drawn to it, I think, come here uh, for the architecture, and they don't realize how much else is actually going on. But when you're able to introduce the public to the material world of the enslaved population, the Drayton family, and talk about the hundreds, if not thousands of years of human occupation on one site, through one excavation, which I know is rare. That doesn't often happen. It's really fascinating to see, that kind of moment of realization and moment of discovery. And I feel like the opportunities to see that in America are becoming fewer and fewer. And that's where we're trying to, make a shift and an impact. And we also do too, when we're not able to be out in the field because of weather, what have you, or if we don't have an active excavation going on, we have a conservation lab that's part of our main visitor center complex. It's a small space, but we've got millions of artifacts that still remain to be labeled from those earlier excavations and recataloging to go on, and then what's coming out of the ground now. So the public can engage with full-time archaeologists and volunteers and watch the process take place. And we also have a small but limited, ex, exhibition space in that lab where we can showcase things that are normally housed in acid-free boxes way in the back. So we're able to bring these artifacts to see the light of day again, and remind the public that it is an ongoing process. But I take your point, Daniel, that when I worked in CRM, especially in areas that were highly visible, like in urban sites, people wanted to know where they were going to be able to get more information from the excavation that's taken place. And um, I don't know, a CRM report is not necessarily the most enthralling document that you'll ever read. And some of these artifacts end up going back to a property owner, or they get put in a state repository or a local repository where nobody ever gets to see them and engage with that again. So,
Yeah, I've felt that way doing CRM before. Not that there's anything wrong with CRM. It's
no,
great.
absolutely not. Yeah.
It's great. But, if you're trying to add to the history of a site or an area, having something the public can physically like grasp onto is great.
Yeah. And we try to do as much of that as we can. I won't say hands-on because obviously you don't want people handling all the artifacts that come out of
No,
the ground.
because people don't wash their hands as often as they should.
There's that, yeah. But people also have sticky fingers. We don't want anything to walk off, and we have an ethical, obligation to be able to safeguard everything. But I think it's that face-to-face interaction and uh, getting people to acknowledge that yes, this is a professional career that you can make, and that people know what they know and have that acquired knowledge for a reason. And I kind of view the work that we do as civil service, um, because if we're taking artifacts out of the ground, but then we're not doing anything to tell people why they're important, or why these places matter, we're doing a disservice to our field and also the people that could potentially become the next generation of field archaeologists.
Exactly. I personally see it as an obligation that since we've chosen a career like this, we need to pass on what we've put together at the very least to make somebody else's, project easier, but also for them to learn from the process. Also, like people, I'm not going to say archaeologists haven't made mistakes in the past. We have, but we also need to be able to learn from those mistakes.
No, absolutely. And I again, it's you know, it's a challenge because especially on a site like this where there is competition for funding to kind of keep the lights on, and that grant writing and everything, and the fervor is always to dig, and it's bread and circuses, and keeping people engaged. You need to show them the process, and there is report writing to be done. And once the objects come out of the ground, this is what you can learn from it, and this is how you can compare it across space and time. Um, and I think that one of the things that I've been struck by the most in my career engaging with the public is how much they're into seeing how things done, and the process at which you arrive at a reasoned interpretation for a space. And that you really never stop learning. Yeah, the more new cataloging systems that come along, the more publications that are continuously written, the more that we're going to know about a given historical site. And it's fun to talk to people about how we acquire that knowledge.
Yeah, that's always a treat to interact with the public because one, I think the public when they come and they actually visit an active like survey, they have a very like distinct impression of what they think archaeology is, and then when they actually get there, they find out that it's something else entirely.
Right. Yeah. No, and it's like people think that it's all, paintbrushes and tiny dental picks and things like that. And, I think paleontology has been a challenge for us to kind of work through. Or people will see something that is being broadcasted on like PBS, about excavations at the Athenian Agora, and it's not always that. I will say that with the current excavation that we have at Drayton Hall, it's definitely an embarrassment of riches because we've got so many different layers of human occupation. But because of where we are in the South Carolina Low Country, this was all ancient seabed. So, I have to eat my words when I say that archaeologists don't dig up dinosaurs because we have megalodon teeth and other prehistoric sea creatures coming out of the ground at the same level that we're finding, some of that 14th century Native American material too. But to be able to educate the public between the differences, you use that as a teaching moment, and that can be a lot of fun too.
So, if people wanted to learn more about Drayton Hall or wanted some advice on being an archaeologist, what would you give them?
Sure. Well, if you want to learn more about Drayton Hall, our website is pretty straightforward. We're continuously updating that. That's just draytonhall.org. We also have a Facebook and Instagram presence where you can see some of the material that's coming out of the ground. Right now, we update that regularly with, updates from the field. We've entered the brave new world of TikTok as well, although you probably won't see me on that as much because I don't know what's going on with it. But we're trying. So all these different platforms. And we also are out there, engaging with students in the broader academic community. The College of Charleston has students that have interned with us. So, if this is something that folks are interested in, please reach out. We're easy to find. Myself and some of the other preservation professionals also teach within the Clemson program in historic preservation, which has a footprint within the city of Charleston. And we're hoping to get more publications out there. But I think that social media is really the easiest way that people have to follow us and kind of keep tabs on what's going on with us.
Well, Luke, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show today. I really enjoyed talking to you.
No, likewise, Daniel. And please, if you're in the Low Country, come on out. And I'll say that to all your other listeners as well. It's always interesting to run into fellow archaeologists when they're taking a casual tour on their vacation. So we'll roll out the red carpet.
Yeah, that's the best thing, folks. Remember, summer is just around the corner. So if you're looking for places to go, feel free to go back through the older episodes. I've pretty much just created a summer plan for you.
Nice. No, that's awesome. I love it.
Well, that's going to do it here for us today at Archaeology After Dark. Again, Luke, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Take care.